10. Influencer abuses waitress. 24-year-old Ohio-based TikToker Gabby Egan became famous on social media for showcasing her life as a mother of 4 who had her first child as a young teenager. She's also known for her occasionally outrageous behavior, which includes an incident in Nashville, Tennessee in March of 2024, when she started fights with several waitresses at Rippy's Honky Tonk. According to witnesses, the ordeal began when Egan bumped into a server who was carrying food to the table, causing her to nearly lose her balance and fall. Egan allegedly told the waitress that she needed to watch out and hit her in the head before she could respond. The server contacted security and Egan was detained while police headed to the scene. During that time, 2 additional witnesses approached the responding officers and said that they saw Egan shoving another waitress and threatening people inside the bar. She was removed from the establishment and taken into police custody, but she did not go willingly. The young woman reportedly fought with the cops, bashing her head against one officer's chin and then kicking him in the thigh. Within 2 days, Egan was free and back on social media. But it wasn't her first time getting in trouble with the law, and it's probably safe to assume that it may not be her last. 9. Dine and Dash turns dangerous. Located in Turnsville, New Jersey, the Nifty 50s diner typically attracts polite, paying customers, which is why it was so surprising when a party of 5 diners left without paying their $70 check one evening in June of 2021. The 20-year-old waitress who served the group ran after them and confronted them about their unpaid bill. She was pulled into a Dodge Durango, which then sped off. The woman was assaulted inside the vehicle and then pushed out of the vehicle along a state highway. She ran back to the restaurant and dialed 911, then went to the hospital for non-life-threatening injuries, including a possible concussion. Police released photos and surveillance footage of the suspects to the public, but it's unclear whether the offenders were ever captured. Following the disturbing incident, law enforcement urged restaurant workers not to chase after people who skip out on their bill, but to instead try to get the Dine and Dasher's license plate number and report the incident to the police. 8. Franois Swain. 47-year-old Franois Swain was working at the City Winery restaurant in Chicago's West Loop neighborhood in May of 2024, when he was viciously attacked by his coworker. The shocking incident began when one of the restaurant's dishwashers, 41-year-old Clarence Johnson, laid face down on the floor and made a few remarks about praising Jesus. Johnson then rose to his feet, walked up to Swain, and pushed him against the bar. A few seconds later, he began stabbing Swain repeatedly. Swain tried to run away as Johnson chased after him and continued to stab him. At some point, he finally stopped, and he even tried to help render aid to Swain, who suffered from stab wounds to the shoulder, chest, and back. The victim was rushed to the hospital where he died from his injuries, and Johnson is now facing charges of first-degree murder and drug possession. Speaking with CBS Chicago, Johnson's girlfriend said that she believed the suspect had previously been diagnosed with schizophrenia and that he did not take medication for it. She mentioned that she noticed changes in his behavior in the days leading up to the deadly stabbing. Johnson has 12 previous felony convictions, mainly for drug charges. He also served a 6-year prison sentence for being a gang member in possession of a firearm. At the time of the stabbing, he had recently completed a probation for a prior drug case. He remains held without bond at the Cook County Jail pending the outcome of his case. 7. Leaf Moy. 42-year-old Leaf Moy was working as a bartender at the Blue Sunday Bar and Grill in Bowie, Maryland in 2017, when he began to feel as though he wasn't getting paid what he deserved. He addressed his grievances by mercilessly shooting 3 of his co-workers in cold blood, killing 46-year-old manager Sherwood Morgan and co-owners Jin Chen and Shui Zhou, who were both in their 20s. A third co-owner, who wasn't at the restaurant that evening, became concerned when nobody contacted them with information about that night's sales. They checked the security footage and saw the victims' bodies, prompting them to dial 911. By the time police arrived, Moy had fled the scene. In an attempt to destroy video evidence of his crimes, he had dumped a laptop into a sink and shot it multiple times. But he destroyed the wrong system, leaving the surveillance footage intact. The police caught up with a disgruntled employee later that day and arrested him on suspicion of 3 counts of murder. According to prosecutors, Moy believed he was owed a $2,100 management fee that the business owners did not agree to pay him. Following an argument over the money, he opened fire on the victims while they were sitting in the office. In court, Moy blamed his behavior on a traumatic brain injury he had suffered 3 years prior to the triple homicide. But he ultimately took responsibility for his actions and pleaded guilty to all 3 murders, landing himself behind bars for 3 consecutive life terms. 6. Nguyệt Lê. 63-year-old mother of 4, Nguyệt Lê was working the opening shift at an Arby's restaurant in New Iberia, Louisiana in May of 2023 when she somehow got trapped in a walk-in freezer. She beat on the door until her hands bled in an attempt to get someone's attention, but nobody heard her. Lê normally worked at an Arby's in Houston, Texas, but at the time, she was filling in as the manager at the New Iberia location on a temporary basis. Her son was also working at the restaurant in Louisiana, and on the day Lê got locked in the freezer, he had the misfortune of being the person to discover her lifeless body. Nobody knows how long Lê was locked in the freezer for, but by the time she was found, it was far too late to save her. She had succumbed to hypothermia and was found in the fetal position on the floor where she had collapsed face first. Following Lê's death, her family learned from a former employee that the freezer's latch had supposedly been broken for months. While foul play is not suspected in this case, her loved ones believe that the restaurant's owners should be held responsible for failing to replace the faulty door latch. They also blame Arby's for not having other safety measures in place to prevent a needless tragedy like this from happening. In a wrongful death lawsuit, the family alleges that the freezer's emergency lever, which is designed to alert others that someone is trapped inside, wasn't working at the time of Lê's death. According to the family's lawyer, the restaurant could have made the device operational simply by connecting it to an active phone line. Additionally, the attorney accused the regional manager of being unresponsive to complaints, including about the freezer latch, a robbery, and other things that needed to be addressed. The outcome of this case remains to be seen. 5. Anthony Lopez. In an unspeakable tragedy that has left an entire family devastated and seeking answers, 30-year-old restaurant employee Anthony Jr. Lopez was murdered outside of his workplace in Framingham, Massachusetts in April of 2024. Police responded to the Shoppers World Plaza at around 10 p.m. on a Saturday night after receiving a call about Lopez being found dead in a dumpster area behind the Hot Table sandwich shop. Authorities have remained tight-lipped about most of the details surrounding Lopez's death, but they have revealed that there were obvious signs of trauma to his body. Both the young father's family and members of the public have expressed shock and concern over how the homicide occurred in such a busy area, as well as the lack of details that are being offered by law enforcement as the investigation unfolds. For now, Lopez's loved ones are hoping that anyone with information on the case contacts law enforcement and shares what they know so that the killer can be brought to justice. 4. Hilbert Walker III. New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival is supposed to be a fun time, but the festivities took a terrifying turn on the first evening of the annual event in April of 2023. Gunfire rang out in front of Mandina's restaurant. The restaurant was busier than usual due to the festival. As soon as customers heard the gunshots, everyone dropped to the floor while an armed guard who was working at the business returned fire. In the meantime, police evacuated a nearby streetcar. One of the restaurant's waiters, 23-year-old Hilbert Walker III, died from a gunshot wound, while a tourist from Chicago was hit by a stray bullet and suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The victims did not know each other and had no connection to one another. According to police, Walker was targeted by the shooter, who was later identified as 22-year-old Kyron Fazande. The suspect was arrested in Fort Bend County, Texas, and extradited to Louisiana, where he remains held without bond on charges of second-degree murder and aggravated battery. 3. Franois PJ Shresta. 24-year-old Franois PJ Shresta was cleaning the floor of a Lebanese restaurant in Parramatta, Australia in July of 2022 when the chemical he was using sparked and caught fire. The incident happened in front of dozens of customers who looked on in horror as Shresta was set ablaze. Bystanders tried to help by holding the severely burned young man beneath the building's emergency sprinklers while emergency responders rushed to the scene. Shresta was taken to a nearby emergency room where he was placed in a medically induced coma. He suffered burns to 30% of his body, including his face, chest, and arms. Unfortunately, his condition did not improve, and he succumbed to his injuries after spending 2 weeks in the hospital. Investigators blamed the fire on a faulty dishwasher, which caused the cleaning fluid Shresta was using to ignite. His death was ruled an accident, and officials took the opportunity to remind the public to be wary of any dangers that come along with the chemicals they use at home and at work. 2. Jose Torres Ayala. During what began as a normal morning in August of 2023, Alaska State Troopers responded to a call about a stabbing at the Mount McKinley Princess Wilderness Lodge in Trapper Creek. They arrived to find a 21-year-old server named Jose Torres Ayala clinging to life with stab wounds to his head, hand, and arm. He was airlifted to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. A fellow employee told police that Torres Ayala had just ordered some food and was sitting at a table in the corner of the restaurant when a dishwasher, 33-year-old Michael Melendez, approached the victim with an odd look in his eyes. The two men briefly exchanged words before Melendez began plunging a large knife into Torres Ayala's body. He then fled the scene on foot while another worker dialed 911. According to court documents, the restaurant's manager was pulling into the parking lot right as Melendez was running away. Witnesses told her what had happened, so she drove after Melendez and ordered him to stop. He finally cooperated when the manager threatened to run him over, and bystanders proceeded to zip tie him. They restrained him until police arrived. At the scene, officers found a bloody 8-inch knife along with other evidence. Melendez refused to speak with law enforcement and requested an attorney. Records show that he's currently being held in pre-trial detention while awaiting trial. His reason for attacking his coworker remains a mystery. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Sam Antoine Ivy. 35-year-old Sam Antoine Ivy was working at a McDonald's restaurant in Hendersonville, North Carolina in October of 2023 when an argument broke out between 30-year-old Jacqueline Mary Reed and another woman at a nearby bus stop. The disagreement continued as one of the women entered the restaurant to try getting away from the other, who followed her inside. A manager intervened and sent Reed out of the restaurant, but she returned a short while later and the altercation resumed. At some point, Ivy got involved. He would later claim that Reed reached for him and touched him, prompting him to pull a gun and shoot her in the chest before fleeing the scene in his vehicle. He was captured at a nearby school after a resource officer recognized him as a student's father. Reed died from her injuries at the scene, and Ivy was charged with second-degree murder, possession of a firearm by a felon, possession of a weapon of mass destruction, and bringing a gun onto educational property. He was detained on a $150,000 bail, and the case appears to be ongoing. Following Ivy's arrest, Hendersonville Police Chief Blair Myhand told local station WYFF4 that the suspect stepped into a situation that he should have stayed out of, describing his behavior as a far overreaction to what was actually happening at the time. A further look into the case revealed that Reed appeared to be distressed in the days leading up to her death. 911 operators tried to get help for her after being alerted to her unusual behavior, which included wandering in circles in a seemingly disoriented state. Reed came to Hendersonville from Johnson City, Tennessee. It's unclear what brought her there, and she was unreceptive to offers of help. The outcome of the case remains to be seen.
Number 10. Arrested for tipping. In 2019, a woman from New York was arrested for leaving a tip at a restaurant in Florida. The tip was for the shocking amount of $5,000. And while this might sound like a good deed, something that should have made the server's whole month, it was actually an evil act of revenge. At least, that's according to the police. The perpetrator's name is Serena Wolf, and she was charged with grand theft. She apparently used her boyfriend's credit card to not only pay for her meal, but to leave the whopping $5,000 tip on her $55 check. Prior to Serena eating at the Clear Sky Cafe in Clearwater Beach, she had gotten into an argument with her boyfriend. According to what he told officers, she was angry that he refused to pay for her plane ticket back to New York. Following the argument, Serena got drunk, she got mad, and she left a fat tip just to get back at him with his own card. She figured if he wouldn't pay for her flight, he could stand to lose the $5,000. She was charged, but as for the money, it appeared to be long gone, split between the server and the rest of the workers at the establishment. After all, it wasn't the cafe's fault they were the recipients of Serena's revenge. Number 9. Cold chicken. In the middle of June back in 2017, chaos erupted at a Quick Chick food stand in Georgia. Latasha Denise Smith and her father, Nathaniel Smith, became enraged when the chicken they just purchased was too cold for their liking. They confronted the owner of the stand, Jeanette Norris, about their chili chicken. But instead of just talking to Jeanette like normal people, they became irate, violent, and confrontational. Latasha then was caught on surveillance video punching Jeanette in the face and knocking her down, just before her father started throwing his fist at her daughter. Jeanette's daughter was only 15 years old at the time, 30 years younger than Nathaniel. The grown man punched the child, knocked her against a brick wall, and then took off running, all over some cold chicken. But don't worry, because this is one of those stories where the attackers really got what was coming. Nathaniel Smith was sentenced to 8 years in prison for aggravated battery and cruelty to children, plus 7 years of probation. His daughter was sentenced to 2 years in prison for aggravated battery. On the day of the sentencing, Jeanette and her daughter were present and made statements in court. And although their attackers were punished accordingly, it still won't take away the trauma of being beaten up over cold chicken. Number 8. DriveThru Insanity. A woman was arrested in Oklahoma City back in 2010 for losing her temper at a McDonald's drive-thru. Her name is Sierra Steed, and she was 20 years old when the cops put her in handcuffs for public intoxication, an outstanding traffic warrant, and just being generally terrible in public. It all started just after midnight on a Tuesday. The police were called to the McDonald's restaurant. The manager of the joint told the cops that Sierra placed an order in the drive-thru, drove right past the first window where she was supposed to pay, and then pulled up to the second window and started getting belligerent. The employee there told her she needed to pay for her food, and that caused her to get more hostile and more disagreeable. She screamed at the employee, claimed that she had indeed paid for her meal when she definitely had not, then got out of her car. Like some kind of troll, she climbed into the drive-thru window and started flailing around, knocking milkshakes off the counter. She refused to leave, but was eventually forced out of the window. But here's the truly insane part. As if she was in the right, Sierra parked her car in the parking lot and just sat there staring at the restaurant. When the police showed up, she was still sitting there. The police realized she was drunk, and so they put her under arrest and carted her away to jail. Number 7. Dead at Little Caesars. In March of 2022, Little Caesars employees in San Antonio made an extremely disturbing discovery. Employees of the restaurant, located near downtown, came across a woman leaning on the wall behind the restaurant, bleeding to death. Shocked, not understanding what was happening, the employees immediately called the police. The cops arrived at about 11 o'clock at night to find a woman named Jessica Medina, in a puddle of blood near a dumpster. She was alive when the Little Caesars employees had found her, but had bled out by the time the police arrived. Paramedics pronounced her dead at the scene. There was no accident either. The police are investigating Medina's death as a homicide. They discovered traumatic wounds to her head, suggesting she had been beaten viciously and then left behind the Little Caesars restaurant to die. After 42 years on this planet, the poor woman lost her life beside a dumpster outside a cheap pizza joint. It really doesn't get much more tragic than that. Number 6. Drunk at Taco Bell. In the summer of 2019, yet another drunk woman embarrassed herself at a fast food joint. This time, it was at Taco Bell. It was such a strange encounter for the local Oregon police that the department posted a woman's mugshot on their Facebook page, captioned, "Weirdest DUI arrest of the weekend." The woman is Eliana Aguilar. She pulled into the drive-thru of the Taco Bell in Beaverton, right in front of a police officer. When she came up to the window, there was a cop in the squad car literally right behind her. The cop could see everything she was doing, but that didn't stop her from acting completely ridiculous. She pulled a bottle of alcohol out of her car, leaned into the drive-thru window, and then poured the booze into the employee's mouth. It doesn't look like the employee was being forced to drink. Eliana was drunk and rambunctious and offered the employee a drink. That in itself isn't such an awful thing, but when the cop behind her saw what was happening and made the arrest, they found Eliana's blood alcohol content to be way over the legal limit. She was driving around wasted, giving away free shots to Taco Bell employees, so she was charged with a DUI and taken to jail. Number 5. Monkeying around. In August of 2014, outside of a restaurant in Beaumont, California, a woman was attacked by a monkey. According to a spokesperson for the Riverside County Animal Services, John Welsh, a 35-year-old woman from Cherry Valley was the victim of the simian attack. She was sitting outside Antonio's Pizza at about 3:30 in the afternoon on a Sunday when she was brutally attacked by a capuchin monkey. She had to be treated at the hospital for a laceration to her forearm, and she was traumatized by the totally unexpected incident. The last thing anyone anticipates while they're sitting outside a pizza restaurant in the middle of the afternoon is to be the victim of a monkey assault. But of course, this wasn't just some stray monkey running through the streets. It was a pet, owned by a woman named Gwendolyn Ringle. She was forced to surrender her pet to Animal Services, who then impounded the primate while they figured out what to do with it. In other words, it went to monkey jail. The actual attack is even crazier than you're going to believe. It involved 3 monkeys. Gwendolyn had a bit of a monkey problem. She was passing by the restaurant on her way to the parking lot with her trio of primates in tow, when one of her monkeys got away from her, grabbed hold of the victim, and took a bite out of her arm like it was sinking its teeth into a juicy burrito. Because the monkey lady didn't have permits to own such animals, all 3 of them were taken away. The one responsible for the attack had to be put in quarantine for 6 months in case it had some kind of virus. Plus, Gwendolyn was forced to pay for its stay there. And then in the end, she wasn't even allowed to get her monkeys back. Number 4. Stung by a wasp. A 68-year-old British woman, an expat living in Spain, was in the beautiful city of Costa Blanca in May of 2022. She was dining at a restaurant and enjoying the warm Spanish weather when she got stung by a wasp. Normally, this wouldn't be a very big deal. Wasps are everywhere, and people get stung by them all the time. It's certainly better to be stung by a wasp than bitten by a monkey. Unless, of course, you're this woman, who suffered anaphylactic shock and died. Her heart stopped beating right there in front of the Hilltop Gastro Pub. Paramedics tried to bring her back to life by performing CPR, but it all happened so fast, there was nothing they could do. It was about 2 p.m. when the woman was stung by the wasp, sitting outside on the veranda with friends and family. And by 3 p.m., she was being taken away in the back of an ambulance. What happened was that this woman had likely gone her whole life without ever being stung by a wasp, so she never knew that she was deathly allergic to them. Then, on this fateful day, she figured it out the hard way. Her body went into shock. The wasp venom pumped into her veins, and that was all she wrote. Unfortunate, but totally out of the victim's control. There was just no way she could have prepared herself for such a random disaster. Number 3. Spiked in Bavaria. In late winter of 2022, a group of people drank some champagne at a bar in Bavaria, Germany. A 52-year-old man dropped dead. Others became violently ill. all after drinking from the same bottle of wine. Nobody had any idea what in the world was going on, as all these people started dropping like flies. It wasn't until later, when the police were able to test the champagne, that they found it spiked with the illegal drug ecstasy. It took a little while for the victims themselves to figure out that they had been poisoned, and by the time they did, it was too late for them to do anything about it. The employees at the restaurant called emergency responders. Then, when the paramedics arrived, there were 8 people collapsed on the floor and writhing in confusion and misery. These people had no idea what drug they'd just taken and were high out of their minds, freaking out. All 8 of them, between the ages of 33 and 52, were rushed to the hospital. All these months later, we still don't know what happened. The police say it was probably negligent homicide, but they don't know who slipped the liquid ecstasy into the champagne bottle, or for what purpose. It wasn't a targeted attack. Nobody had anything against this group of people. It may have been one of them trying to spice up the party, or they may have been given the wrong champagne bottle. Number 2. Mexico City tacos gone wrong. A man in Mexico City is facing charges of attempted murder after a brutal daylight attack at a restaurant in spring of 2022. The man, identified by Mexican authorities as Siddhartha N., picked up a boulder, hefted it over his head with both hands, and brought it down on the back of the skull of a 19-year-old named Andrew Nava. He did it in broad daylight, inside a taco restaurant in the trendy Roman neighborhood. The whole thing was captured on security cameras inside the restaurant. But what makes it so completely horrifying is that the attack was unprovoked. Andrew had been sitting inside the restaurant with his father when the man picked up the stone slab and tried to cave his head in for no reason. The two had never met. They had never spoken to one another. The attacker was simply a man who lived on the street in the Roma area, and at that moment when he walked past the restaurant, he decided to kill someone. It's scary because it could happen to anyone. You're trying to enjoy a nice meal in your favorite restaurant, the next thing you know, some random person is bashing you in the head with a rock. Luckily, Andrew was quickly brought to the hospital and was last reported in stable condition. He'll pull through, but it was a close call. He may lose his sense of smell permanently, but at least he'll be alive. Number 1. The Sword Breakin. A man in Florida has been arrested and charged with burglary after he used a sword to break in through the drive-thru of a Wendy's and stuff his face with a bunch of random food. His name is Philip Tran, and he committed one of the most bizarre burglaries in restaurant history. Northport officers were called at about 6:30 in the morning on a Tuesday in April of 2022. Philip had forced his way through the window with his samurai sword, then wreaked havoc inside the restaurant. He ate whatever food he could find, discharged a fire extinguisher, and then fled like a crazy person. The damages totaled about $300, and Philip was tracked down about an hour later. The next day, he told the police that he couldn't even remember what had happened. Apparently, Philip had been given medication by his doctor for ADHD and depression, but instead of curing his ailments, it caused him to black out and go on a crazy crime spree. He was released from prison soon after and ordered to seek a psychiatrist.
Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend an entire summer working in a hot kitchen with no air conditioning and a head chef who's meaner than Gordon Ramsay, or as a server at a restaurant that's known for attracting extremely demanding diners who don't tip very well? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.